Hi, so there's been a new build on the alpha. Retribution Paladins changed a bit. We've changed quite a lot. Now, for those who are new to this series, this update 4, every time there's a new update, I go over the changes. In this video, I am going through the changes. I'm going to say how that's going to impact on our gameplay, what I think of it. This is not a gameplay video though, but that will be coming out. I'll go into some dungeons, see how it works. You can see how it's all working in practice. I'll also log those fights, as long as I remember. When that's up, you should see an annotation down here. If you don't see an annotation yet, it means it hasn't gone up yet, but it will go up in the next 24 hours. So stay subscribed. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through talents. There are some changes to core abilities as well, but it's easiest to go through those through the talents because some of those core abilities have been folded into talent. You can see down here the talent thing flashing because they haven't just changed a few talents, they've changed them so much that they've all been reset. So let's get into it. So on the top row, first of all, execution sentence. Main changes here is the cooldown is now affected by haste. So instead of a flat 20-second cooldown, it's affected by our haste. You can see at the moment here, 16-second cooldown. The damage has been reduced as well. So no more 2 million crits when I'm not even at level cap. Still hardest hitting ability you've got for 3 holy power. So you are absolutely going to use this off cooldown. Eye for an eye is sort of eye for an eye as it is. Remember, for raiding, we're not realistically going to take this. But to be fair, I mean, a lot of people sort of moan about this, and fair enough, because it's clearly a PvP talent. But in reality, anything you put in here isn't going to get taken because we're either going to have execution centers or consecration, which also is as it was. Now, on the Crusader Strike line, this is one of the first changes. There's a number of people who have complained on forums that they don't like that some of the talents were just percentage increases to a particular core ability. I personally didn't have an issue with that because that was like the unmodified change. But fair dues to Blizzard, a lot of people did complain about this and Blizzard have responded to this. There are now no talents that just give you a flat increase to our damage abilities. I'll make that distinction. So the Fires of Justice now, instead of just increasing damage to Crusader Strike, basically bakes in Conviction. We now do not have Conviction as baseline. This solves a couple of problems. It stops, it means Blade of Justice doesn't have a chance to proc Conviction, which means we don't have the problem with the Divine Hammers that I talked about in the last videos. So what this means is your Crusader Strike will do what it does, but has a 25% chance to cause your next Holy Power spender to cost 1 less Holy Power, or 1 Holy Power fewer. Bad grammar, Blizzard. Crusader Flurry as much as it was. It's your standard Crusader Strike, but with 3 charges. And Zeal is sort of what it was, 2 charges. The haste has now been radically reduced, as I said it had to be. It's now 5% per stack, so we can have a look at this. I am interested in this. I'm just going to take Zeal for now. I'm going to take everything. Because what I want to do, sorry, I'm clicking on the wrong tab. I want to look at what my haste is at the moment. 24.97. So let's just bang out a few Crusader Strikes here. So that's our 3 stacks there. So it's plus 15%. So we can see it is still multiplicative. Hate that word. Which means it's not just adding a flat 15%. It's like 1 and 115% of what our base haste is from gear. So yeah, we're getting up to that. Now what that does to our judgment, remember judgment lasts for 6 seconds, 8.35 second cooldown just with that alone. So that means we could keep up the judgment debuff for most of the time, just not all the time. So we just look at this up here. We've got a fair amount of time on it, but it does expire before we can refresh it again. A good couple of seconds without it. Now that would make it tricky to use with Execution Sentence, because remember, Execution Sentence doesn't do its damage until the end of it. It's now 8 seconds, by the way, rather than 10 seconds. But still, if you use Execution Sentence and Judgment at the same time, You would sort of get away with this because you can use your judgment again with the haste I currently had there. About 8 seconds later, it'd be touch and go. In reality, what you probably want to do is use your execution sentence a few seconds after judgment, so that when you use judgment off cooldown later on, it would work. Now, if I just take execution sentence, just to show that, so I've already got 3 holy power, so that, oh, it's missed. Oh, well, that's clever. Have we got a different target done? So through the power of, well, stopping fraps and starting it up against somewhere else, we're onto a train dummy that I won't miss on. So I'm just going to build up my stacks there. Fire off execution sentence. So I'm just going to wait a couple of seconds there. Use judgment. So what we need really is for that judgment to still be up, which it is when the execution sentence landed. So that's fine there. Now, that's the Crusader Strikes line. Onto the crowd control. This is as it was. I'm just double checking here. I can see nothing that is a change in any of these crowd control options. So then we go down onto the Blade of Justice. Remember what I said, there are no talents now that just flat increase Blade of Justice. So Virtue's Blade doesn't just increase Blade of Justice. It now means critical strikes do 3 times normal damage as opposed to double damage. So your crits will do extra damage with Virtue's Blade, which of course means that secondary stats, now I'm going to do a video on secondary stats, just specific, not specific to Retribution Paladins, but for all classes, because Blizzard have put out some information about how they want them to be more interesting. And this, one of the ways for us is, obviously if you take Virtue's Blade, crits will be a more powerful secondary stat than it would be without this. Blade of Wrath has also changed slightly. It still does what it does, but now, remember what I said before, is haste wasn't affecting the cooldown. Now it is. We can see that the cooldown is reduced. So we should be able to get exactly the same amount of holy power, whether we took Virtue's Blade or Blade of Wrath, as long as we're using them off cooldown. Then Divine Hammer is just what Divine Hammer was before, generates 1 holy power, remember, but a reduced cooldown. We probably wouldn't generate as much as with this. And because it doesn't proc Conviction anymore, now means you're actually not going to generate as much holy power with this. Hopefully the damage will be reflected in that. I mean, it looks very much like you're going to need at least 3, maybe more mobs to make this worthwhile. I'm just thinking over Blade of Wrath. I'll have to think about that later on. It does tick quite frequently though. Maybe 2 mobs, 2 or 3. What do we think? I'll work that out later on and do that in the dungeon gameplay video that will be coming up. On to the next tier then. Big differences here, or big difference here. Seal of Light. It's gone back to attack speed. I missed that initially. It's gone back to attack speed instead of haste. Makes it a load of crap again. So if those people who don't particularly like keeping up an Inquisition buff, of course we could come to a point where Seal of Light still ends up being an increase for us because of the movement speed increase, the 20% extra movement speed. But if you don't like maintaining these buffs, and unless you have to properly min-max, you certainly won't have to be compelled to take this, because attack speed is a load of crap. Yes, it means we do more damage by swinging our weapon, but we have no abilities that proc from melee swings, so it has no interaction with any other abilities or any of our other damage. Load of rubbish. This whole tier is now a load of rubbish. I'm hoping this will change. Holy Wrath is what Holy Wrath did before. You can see it has been significantly nerfed. Significantly. Compare it with Templar's Verdict now. Holy Wrath does less damage. Still channeled. Does less damage. Of course it does more damage against stunned mobs. But, you know, the problem is I don't really know. Do you know what I need to actually... What an imbecile. Power of Fraps again. Right, so I got myself out of combat. Took Holy Wrath. I'm not going to put the Judgment on, so I just want to test that. I mean, look, that amount of damage. Might do a lot more damage. So, it does less damage and you've got to channel it. So the only benefit of Holy Wrath now is the fact you get some healing over it. But of course, if you are being hit at the same time, it will not do as much because that channeling will be disrupted. Word of Glory. It's now 5 friendly targets. It looks like it does more healing though. This actually could be better for dungeons. Sorry, I opened that up again. Than it was in its last iteration. Would you still take it? Actually, in a dungeon you might. Simply because you probably won't take Holy Wrath if you have faith in your healer. Because remember, this does healing as well. This does more healing than this. I mean, this is the thing I don't get about Holy Wrath now. What is it? For damage, Templar's Verdict does more damage. And it's not channeled. Holy Wrath only does more damage against a stun mob. But you still got to channel it. You still got to spend that time. Word of Glory does more healing. And it does it to your whole party. And Seal of Light, of course, at least gives you the movement speed increase. But to be honest, out of these, you would probably take Seal of Light. I'm just being salty, I suppose, because it is still a DPS increase. But if you think in a dungeon you might get into trouble, you might need some of your healing, take Word of Glory. It could be a good dungeon talent. But I say that by virtue of the fact that now the other two talents are very uninspiring. On to the next one. These are much the same as before. Divine Intervention did what it did before. Potentially a nice little ability there. Divine Steed is the one it's directly competing with. That's your movement speed increase. Blaze of Light, no use in group PvE really. It buffs your Flash of Light. You're not going to use that really. Now on the last tier, Blessings of Justice. This is different now. We know we can, if we didn't know before, we do know that they, unless they have a complete change of heart, are going to persist with these greater blessings. This talent doubles the effect of them. Sounds decent. My issue with this is because they've already said that these blessings, like Greater Blessing of Might being the key one here, that the damage is going to be baked into our overall damage. So they are going to tune our overall damage to take account of the fact that we're going to have 3 Greater Blessings of Might up around the raid or the party in the case of a dungeon. So you could say, okay, so if they then double that effect, are they going to take that into account? Are they assuming we take this talent? If not, then this then becomes quite good. If you have 3 people in your group that do a lot more damage than you do, putting this Greater Blessing of Might on them with this talent could well buff your damage. Now that to me sounds like it's going to make it very hard to tune. And another thing that's going to make it hard to tune is the fact that it is competing with Mass Judgment. Mass Judgment has changed a little. It still means that we put the Judgment debuff on all mobs within 8 yards of our target. That is going to make it essential in AoE. But also, rather than buffing the damage of Judgment as it did before, it increases the duration by 100%, as it did a couple of builds ago. So you could take this talent even for single target for the sake of convenience, because if I take this, and let's even take it off Zeal, let's just put Crusader Flurry back on. So I've got no haste improvements. I've still got a lot of haste, it has to be said, because you get a lot of haste on the questing gear. It's like almost all haste mastery. But so I'm going to put the Mass Judgment on now so we can have a look at that. Wait for are we going to get there? We could just, if we're using Judgment off cooldown with the haste I have, which is about 25%, I can just about keep that Judgment debuff up. So even on single target, you could argue it's, for convenience sake, it's effective. Now that doesn't mean to say that we will always be taking it, because you will probably find on single target that your Blessings of Justice, again, especially if you have got at least 3 DPS in your group, or in your raid realistically, you don't have 3 more DPS than you in a dungeon, are you? That will do significant amounts more damage than you, you're probably going to get a DPS increase out of that. Equality becomes complete crap. Not only have they put the cooldown back up to 5 minutes from 2 minutes where it was before, so let's go back, but also the damage is now only done up to 3 enemies. Now of course they had to cap the number of enemies because it was absolutely ridiculous before, but you completely have no use for this anymore. in PvE. And the reason for that is because, first of all, it's pretty uninspiring at 5-minute cooldown and restricted to 3 mobs, even though it would do a lot of damage even on 3 mobs. Secondly, are you going to take it over Mass Judgment or Blessings of Justice? I don't think so. Maybe in a dungeon if your tank and healer are pretty bad. Because remember, you've got to lose a load of health for this to work. And the last thing to note, just before we finish on talents, is there has been a big change to our mastery. Now, remind you what mastery did. First of all, in live, I'll go through the evolution of this for people who may be new to these video series. Mastery in live, of course, buffs the damage of some of our abilities. It means that those abilities do an amount of holy damage in addition, based on our mastery value. In alpha, it started off like that. And then they changed it so it did just extra damage, not specifically holy damage, which means that if the ability was a physical damage dealer, it would do extra physical damage. Then they changed it completely in the last build, to the point where it increased the damage, or the debuff, sorry, the effect of the debuff from Judgment. Now, it still does that, but they've added an extra effect. So as well as increasing the damage taken, from the Judgment debuff, which is not as much as before. They've toned that down, but it also increases your damage done by Judgment itself, the actual ability, which is, I suppose, fairly handy because you are going to be using Judgment a lot, and Judgment is by no means a weak spell. It's pretty decent. So Mastery is all right. Now, it's very different to in live, but that's interesting enough. That's fine. So those are the changes we've had with this latest alpha build, and no doubt there will be others to come. It really doesn't look like they're running out of steam on this. I don't know how many more updates there will be to go, but I will keep up to date with every single one of them, rest assured. The next video on this series to come out will be the dungeon gameplay, which I'll be sorting out later on tonight, but that may not come out until tomorrow, but it may come out tonight, who knows. And the other thing is a video on secondary stats. Blizzard have given a bit of commentary on that, so I'm going to give my own little commentary on that. That'll be quite a short video. So in the meantime, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe unless you've already done that. If you don't like, then comment, or just dislike if that's your choice. And until next time, I'll see you later.